They laughed so hard Harlan had to wipe tears from his eyes. His brother Sterling, accepting 40 acres of worthless marshland as inheritance, while better men took fertile soil and water rights. The joke of the territory. The fool who chose mud over prosperity. But in 48 hours, 3 armed men would surround Sterling's cabin demanding what his dog had pulled from beneath that mud. And Harlan would be running through darkness carrying more gold than most men saw in 10 lifetimes. All because everyone had been too busy laughing to notice what Sterling's dog already knew. Sterling Wade stood in front of his brother's house that morning, holding the deed to land nobody wanted. Harlan leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, that satisfied smile cutting across his face like a fresh wound. The entire family had gathered to witness the moment. Nora shaking her head, Gideon trying not to laugh outright, even young Tessa covering her mouth with her hand. "You could have taken the dry acres north of town," Harlan announced loud enough for neighbors to hear. "Good soil, water rights, but you chose the swamp. You'll starve on that land, Sterling, and when you do, don't come begging at my door." The family laughed. All of them. The sound followed Sterling as he turned and walked away. What none of them saw was Copper. The dog sat perfectly still at Sterling's feet during the humiliation, but his eyes were fixed on the distant marshland with an intensity that bordered on unnatural focus. Sterling had followed the animal that morning before signing the papers, watched as Copper dug obsessively in the same spot, driven by a scent only he could detect through water and mud. Old leather, rotted wood, something buried deep that had been decomposing for years, releasing traces through the marsh. And when Sterling had knelt to see what the dog had uncovered, he found the corner of something metallic, dark with age. A strongbox, heavy enough that it took all his strength just to shift it slightly in the clay. Sterling had covered it back up, signed the deed, let his family laugh. Because inside that box, if his instincts were right, was the reason the previous owner had gone mad. The reason Silas Trask had let 40 acres sit untouched for 20 years. The reason no one had been allowed to work this land. Copper had found something, and whatever it was, someone had buried it deliberately beneath mud and water and time, hiding it in the one place nobody would ever want to claim. Sterling walked toward the marshland now, his family's laughter still echoing behind him. Copper pulled at the makeshift leash, straining toward the spot where the strongbox waited. The dog understood something Sterling was only beginning to grasp. That what lay beneath the mud would either prove him right or destroy what little respect he had left. He just had to dig it out before his family stopped laughing and started asking questions. Before the men who had buried that fortune 20 years ago realized someone had finally claimed the land they thought would stay worthless forever. Before everything his family believed about him collided with what Copper had already discovered. Sterling returned to the marshland 3 hours after his family finished laughing. The morning sun was already burning hot, the kind of heat that made men seek shade and animals go still. 10 years had passed since the war ended, and in that time, Sterling had learned that some losses were more permanent than others. His family's respect was one of those losses. Copper pulled hard against the rope, his entire body straining toward the spot where the strongbox lay buried. The dog had been disappearing every morning for a week, returning covered in mud and exhausted. Sterling had followed him yesterday and watched as Copper dug obsessively at one particular location, his nose pressed to the ground, tracking something Sterling couldn't smell, but the dog found irresistible. Old leather, probably, or rotted wood, things that had been buried long enough to decompose and release scents through the water and mud. Sterling carried a shovel, a pickaxe, and a coil of heavy rope. The tools felt inadequate for what lay ahead, but they were all he could afford. Harlan had inherited the better equipment, the livestock, the fertile land north of town. Sterling had chosen this swamp, and his family had made certain everyone knew exactly how foolish that choice appeared. The deed sat folded in his pocket, the ink barely dry. His property now, legal and recorded. Whatever he found here belonged to him, regardless of what his family might claim later. Copper reached the excavation site first and began pawing at the ground, his claws scraping against something solid beneath the mud. Sterling caught up and dropped to his knees beside the dog. The corner of the strongbox was still visible where they had uncovered it that morning before Sterling went to sign the papers. The metal was dark with corrosion, sealed tight against water and time. Sterling drove the shovel into the mud surrounding the box, working to expose more of its surface. His shoulders already ached from the earlier digging, and his hands were raw where blisters had formed and broken. The ground fought him, sucking at the blade, releasing foul-smelling gases that had been trapped beneath the surface for years. After an hour of work, Sterling had exposed the entire top surface. The box measured roughly 3 feet long, 2 feet wide, constructed from heavy iron meant to protect something valuable. Someone had gone to considerable effort to bury this, had wrapped it in leather and wooden crates, then sunk it deep in the one piece of land nobody would ever want to work. Sterling worked the shovel beneath one edge and tried to lever it upward. The box shifted slightly but remained embedded in the clay-like mud that surrounded it. He repositioned and tried again, his muscles burning from the effort. Copper circled the growing hole, whining softly, his attention fixed on the strongbox with an intensity Sterling had never witnessed in the usually calm dog. It took another hour before Sterling managed to free the strongbox completely. He dragged it onto solid ground, his body trembling with exhaustion. The box was heavier than he had expected, so heavy that he had to stop twice to rest before getting it clear of the water, metal and whatever was inside. Real weight, real substance. Sterling sat back on his heels, staring at the locked strongbox. His shirt was soaked with sweat and mud. His hands were bleeding from broken blisters. But for the first time in 3 years, since the day he realized his family saw him as nothing more than a burden to be tolerated, Sterling felt something close to hope. Maybe this would prove them wrong. Maybe this would show Harlan that Sterling's instincts were worth more than his brother's careful planning and safe choices. Or maybe the box was empty. Maybe it contained nothing but rust and disappointment, and his family would have one more thing to laugh about. Sterling reached for the lock, testing its strength. Solid. Unbroken. He would need better tools to open it. But getting those tools meant going into town, and going into town meant risking questions he wasn't ready to answer. The sound of footsteps made Sterling's head snap up. Someone was coming through the marsh grass. Gideon emerged from the tall grass, his boots caked with mud, his face flushed from the effort of crossing the marshland. He was 19, old enough to carry his father's opinions as if they were his own, but young enough to lack any restraint in expressing them. He stopped when he saw Sterling sitting beside the strongbox, his eyes widening as he took in the scene. The excavated hole, the mud-covered tools, the iron box sitting on solid ground like evidence of something Sterling had been trying to hide. "What is that?" Gideon's voice carried across the space between them, sharp with curiosity and something else. Accusation, maybe. Sterling stood slowly, positioning himself between his nephew and the strongbox. Copper moved to Sterling's side and growled low in his throat, a warning sound Sterling had rarely heard from the usually gentle dog. "Something I found on my property." "Your property," Gideon laughed. But there was no humor in it. "You mean the swamp nobody wanted? The land Father said would starve you before winter." He took a step closer, trying to get a better view. "What's inside it?" "Don't know yet." "Lock solid." Gideon's eyes moved from the strongbox to Sterling's face, and Sterling saw the calculation happening behind them. The same look Harlan got when he was figuring out how to turn a situation to his advantage. "Father's going to want to know about this. He'll say you found it before signing the deed. That means it belongs to the estate, not to you." The words hit Sterling like a physical blow. The timing would be impossible to prove. He had discovered the strongbox early this morning, signed the papers 3 hours later. But who could verify exactly when the discovery had been made? Harlan had connections in town, friendships with men who held official positions. Sterling had nothing but his word, and his word had never carried much weight in this family. "I signed the agreement yesterday," Sterling said, the lie forming quickly. He had signed this morning, but the agreement to take the land had been made days ago, close enough to the truth that it might hold up. The deed was just the formality. This land was already mine when I found the box. Gideon shook his head slowly, a smile pulling at the corners of his mouth. "You think Father will believe that? You think anyone will?" He paused, seemed to reconsider something, then continued in a lower voice. "You should have kept this quiet. Uncle Sterling should have opened it in secret and taken whatever's inside before anyone knew it existed. But you didn't, did you? You sat here in the open, right where anyone could see." Sterling said nothing. The criticism stung because it was accurate. He should have been more careful, should have anticipated that Gideon or someone else might come looking. But some part of him had wanted to do this honestly, to prove that he could find something valuable through legitimate means rather than deception. Gideon backed away slowly, his eyes never leaving the strongbox. "I'm going to get Father. He'll want to see this himself. And he'll want to talk to the land office about when exactly you signed those papers and what rights you have to anything found on this property. He turned and started walking back through the marsh grass, then stopped and looked over his shoulder. You should have just taken the dry acres when they were offered, Sterling. Would have saved everyone a lot of trouble. Sterling watched his nephew disappear into the tall grass. The afternoon sun was starting to sink lower, casting long shadows across the swampland. He looked down at the strongbox, then at Copper. The dog had stopped growling but remained tense, alert, his body pressed against Sterling's leg as if offering support the only way he knew how. Sterling had perhaps 2 hours before Harlan arrived, maybe less if Gideon ran the whole way. 2 hours to decide whether to stand his ground or hide what he had found. 2 hours to figure out how to protect a discovery that could either prove his family wrong or confirm every cruel judgment they had made about him. He knelt beside the strongbox and ran his hand across the corroded surface. Whatever was inside had been valuable enough for someone to bury it deliberately, in the one place nobody would think to look. Sterling made his decision. He grabbed the rope and began fashioning a harness around the strongbox, preparing to move it before his brother arrived. Sterling pulled the strongbox across the marshland, the rope cutting into his shoulders as he leaned into the weight. The box left a deep furrow in the soft ground, filling with water almost as quickly as it was created. Copper ranged ahead, his nose still working the air, drawn to the same smell of old rotting leather and decayed wood that had led him to the burial site in the first place. Dogs could track scent through water and mud. That much Sterling understood. The strongbox had been wrapped in leather and wooden crates before burial, and 10 years beneath the marsh had turned those materials into something pungent enough for a dog to detect. The cabin stood at the far edge of the property, a small structure Sterling had built himself 3 years ago, when he first realized his family would never offer him a place under their roofs. 2 rooms, a stone fireplace, walls that leaked when the wind blew hard. But it was his, and more importantly, it was far enough from the main road that casual visitors rarely made the journey. Sterling's arms burned by the time he reached the cabin. He dragged the strongbox inside and shoved it against the back wall, then threw a wool blanket over it. His hands were shaking, not from the physical effort, but from something deeper. Fear, maybe, or the first stirring of hope he had allowed himself to feel in years. He thought about his brother's face this morning, the way Harlan had smiled while watching Sterling sign away his future on worthless swampland. The memory made Sterling's jaw tighten. He stepped outside and used marsh grass to sweep away the furrow marks leading to his door. The work was futile, he knew. Anyone determined to find the strongbox would find it. But the effort gave his hands something to do while his mind raced through possibilities and consequences. Copper barked once, a sharp warning sound. Sterling straightened and saw them coming across the open ground. Not just Harlan and Gideon, but 3 other men as well. He recognized 2 of them. Marcus Gentry, a landowner whose property bordered the marsh to the north, and Deputy Rawlins, a man whose friendship with Harlan went back 20 years. They walked with purpose, spread out slightly, the way men moved when they expected trouble. Sterling's hand moved instinctively toward the old revolver he kept tucked in his belt, then stopped. Drawing a weapon against a deputy would end only one way, regardless of who was right or wrong. Harlan reached the cabin first. His face showed none of the amusement from earlier. The transformation unsettled Sterling more than the anger would have. His brother looked almost worried, almost afraid. "Sterling, we need to talk about what you found. It's on my land. That makes it mine." "That's not how it works." Marcus Gentry stepped forward, removing his hat in a gesture that might have seemed respectful if his eyes hadn't been calculating the value of everything they touched. "I held the original deed to that marshland before it went to Silas Trask. Had an agreement with him, actually. Verbal contract that anything of value found on the property would be split between us. Trask died before we could formalize it in writing, but I have witnesses who heard the terms." Sterling felt something cold settle in his stomach. A verbal contract from a dead man, witnesses who would say whatever Marcus Gentry paid them to say. "You're lying. Careful." Deputy Rawlins moved his hand to rest on his belt, near his sidearm but not quite touching it. "Marcus came to me this afternoon with a legitimate claim. I'm here to make sure everything's handled legal and proper." He paused, his eyes meeting Sterling's. "You can cooperate, or I can get a warrant and search the premises by force. Your choice." Sterling looked at his brother. Harlan's expression had shifted to something almost apologetic, but not quite. The look of a man who regretted what was about to happen but wouldn't stop it from happening. You brought them here. You told Gentry what I found. Gideon told me, Harlan said quietly. And I told Marcus because he has a right to know. Because there are legal considerations you don't understand. The only thing I don't understand is why my own brother would side with a man like Gentry over family. The words hung in the air between them. Harlan flinched just slightly but said nothing. Sterling made his decision in the space between heartbeats. Fighting would accomplish nothing except getting him arrested or shot. He walked past the men, past his brother's carefully neutral expression, past the deputy's suspicious glare, and entered his cabin. The strongbox sat exactly where he had left it, covered by the thin blanket that fooled no one. He pulled the blanket aside and dragged the box into the center of the room. You want to see what's inside? Sterling kept his voice level, though his heart was hammering against his ribs. Then let's all see it together. That way there's no question about what was found or who has claim to it. The men filed in, crowding the small space. Harlan pushed to the front, Gideon right behind him wearing an expression of barely contained excitement. Marcus Gentry hung back near the door, his face carefully composed. Deputy Rawlins positioned himself where he could watch everyone at once. Sterling picked up the heavy hammer he used for splitting wood. The lock was solid, corroded, but intact. He raised the hammer and brought it down hard on the mechanism. The impact sent a jarring vibration through his arms. He struck again, and again. On the fourth blow, something inside the lock gave way with a sharp crack. Sterling set down the hammer and worked his fingers under the lid. The metal groaned as he lifted, hinges protesting after years of remaining sealed. The smell hit him first. Old paper, mildew, and beneath that, leather rot and rust. The strongbox was packed tight. Sterling pulled out the top layer, revealing bundles wrapped in oilcloth and tied with rotting cord. His hands trembled slightly as he unwrapped the first bundle. Paper money. Old bills. Denominations he recognized from before the war ended 10 years ago. He unwrapped a second bundle. More paper money. A third bundle. The same. The hope that had been building in Sterling's chest began to crumble. He knew what this meant. Everyone in the room knew. Harlan reached forward and grabbed one of the bundles. His fingers working through the stack. His shoulders sagged slightly. Confederate currency. This is worthless, Sterling. Has been since the surrender. Marcus Gentry stepped closer and picked up one of the bills, holding it to the light. Trask must have hidden this during the war. Thought the South would win. Thought these bills would be worth something when the fighting ended. He dropped the bill back into the box with obvious disgust. You risked everything for paper that won't buy a single meal. Gideon's laugh was sharp and cruel. Father was right about you. Even when you find a fortune, it turns out to be worthless. Sterling stared down at the bundles of useless currency. All that work, all that hope, all of it for nothing. He started to lift the last bundle out, needing to confirm the full extent of his failure, when Copper suddenly pushed forward through the crowd of men. The dog had been quiet until now, sitting near the door. But something had changed. Copper moved directly to the strongbox and pressed his nose against the bottom, sniffing intensely at the base where the bundles had been removed. His body went rigid, ears forward, and he began pawing at the interior bottom of the box with his front paw, scratching at it repeatedly with an urgency Sterling had only seen when the dog had first found the burial site. Get that animal away from here, Marcus Gentry said, taking a step back. But Sterling was watching Copper closely. The dog wasn't acting randomly. He was focused on one specific spot at the bottom of the strongbox, pawing and sniffing, as if he could smell something the humans couldn't detect through the layers of old paper and rust. Sterling knelt beside the box and ran his hand over the area where Copper was scratching. The surface felt smooth, solid, but when he pressed down, something shifted slightly. He looked closer and saw what he had missed before, a barely visible seam running along the edges of the bottom. The depth of the interior didn't match the exterior dimensions of the box. Sterling's breath caught. He worked his fingernail into the seam while Copper continued pawing beside him, the dog's agitation growing. The false bottom came away, revealing a second compartment beneath the first. Wrapped in oilcloth, protected from water and time, were objects that caught the afternoon light and threw it back in shades of deep yellow. Gold coins, hundreds of them, maybe more, packed tight and heavy. Each one stamped with dates and denominations that would be honored anywhere in the country. Sterling lifted one out, feeling the weight of it in his palm. Real, solid, valuable. Without Copper's insistence, without the dog pawing at that exact spot, Sterling would have removed the worthless paper currency and never known what lay beneath. The silence in the cabin was absolute. Then Marcus Gentry took a step forward, his carefully composed expression fracturing into something raw and hungry. Marcus Gentry reached for the strongbox, his hand moving with the confidence of a man accustomed to taking what he wanted. Sterling moved faster. He swept the gold coins back into the hidden compartment and slammed the false bottom into place, then shoved the bundles of worthless Confederate currency on top. The movement was instinctive, protective, the same way a man might shield his face from a coming blow. "That gold is part of the claim I filed," Gentry said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "I had an agreement with Silas Trask. Everything of value on that land belongs to both of us, split equal." "Trask is dead," Sterling said. "Has been for 3 years. Your agreement died with him. There were witnesses to the contract. Men who will testify in court. Men you'll pay to lie, you mean?" Gentry's face flushed dark. He turned to Deputy Rawlins. "You heard him. He's refusing to honor a legal claim. That gives you cause to confiscate the strongbox as evidence until a judge can rule on ownership." Deputy Rawlins shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. He looked at Sterling, then at the strongbox, then back at Gentry. "I can't just take a man's property without proper cause, Marcus. Even if you had a contract with Trask. Sterling's right that the agreement ended when Trask died. Unless you got something in writing, there's no legal basis for. Then get a warrant." Gentry's words came out clipped and hard. "Go to Judge Morrison right now and get a warrant to seize that box until we can sort this out proper in court." "Judge Morrison is in the county seat," Rawlins said slowly. "Won't be back until next week at the earliest." Sterling felt a small surge of relief. A week. That gave him time to figure out his next move. Time to maybe get the gold somewhere safe before Gentry could use his connections and money to steal it through legal manipulation. But Harlan stepped forward, his expression troubled. "Sterling, listen to me. You need to think about this carefully. Marcus has resources you don't have. Lawyers. Connections. If he takes you to court, you'll lose everything paying for your defense even if you win in the end. So you're saying I should just give up?" Sterling heard the bitterness in his own voice. "Let him take what's mine because fighting would cost too much? I'm saying you should consider his offer. If he's willing to split the gold, that's still more money than you've ever seen. Enough to buy real land somewhere else. Start fresh without all this trouble hanging over you." Sterling looked at his brother and saw something he hadn't expected. Not greed or judgment, but genuine concern mixed with exhaustion. Harlan looked older than he had this morning, worn down by something Sterling didn't fully understand. Maybe maintaining the family's position in town cost more than Sterling realized. Maybe protecting his own reputation meant making choices that left him tired and hollow. "I'm not giving up what's mine," Sterling said quietly. "Not to Marcus Gentry. Not to anyone." Gideon moved closer to his father and spoke in a voice clearly meant for everyone to hear. "He's being stubborn because he wants to prove something, wants to show us we were wrong for laughing. But all he's proving is that he doesn't understand how the world works." The words stung more than Sterling wanted to admit, because there was truth in them. Part of him did want to prove his family wrong, wanted to stand in front of Harlan with gold coins in his hands and watch his brother's face as he realized Sterling had succeeded where everyone expected failure. Marcus Gentry seemed to sense an opportunity. He adjusted his tone, making it reasonable and measured. "Sterling, I'm a businessman. I don't want to fight you in court if we can reach an agreement now. What if I offered you 40% of the gold? You keep almost half, I take the rest, and we both walk away satisfied. No lawyers, no judges, just 2 men making a fair deal. 40% of what I found on my own land?" Sterling shook his head. "That's not fair. That's robbery dressed up in polite words. 60% then. You keep more than half. I take what's fair given my prior claim." Sterling felt the pressure building. Everyone in the cabin was watching him, waiting to see if he would break. Copper pressed against his leg, the dog's warmth solid and reassuring. Sterling looked down at the animal that had led him to the fortune everyone now wanted to divide up and claim for themselves. Sterling was about to refuse the offer when he heard horses outside. Multiple riders approaching fast, their hoofbeats drumming against the hard-packed earth near the cabin. Everyone in the room went still, listening. The horses came to a stop, and Sterling heard voices, rough voices, men who spoke with the kind of confidence that came from carrying weapons and knowing how to use them. Deputy Rawlins moved to the window and looked out. His face went pale. That's the Caldwell brothers. All three of them. The name hit Sterling like cold water. Everyone in the territory knew about the Caldwell brothers. They ran a ranch 20 miles north and had a reputation for taking what they wanted through intimidation and violence. Not outlaws exactly, because they were careful to stay just inside the law, but close enough that most people gave them a wide path. Marcus Gentry cursed under his breath. I didn't tell them about this. I swear I didn't. Then how do they know? Harlan moved away from the window, his hand instinctively moving toward his belt, where Sterling knew he kept a small pistol. Gideon. Sterling said the name with certainty. He looked at his nephew and saw the truth written across the young man's face. Guilt mixed with defiance. You didn't go straight to your father, did you? You stopped somewhere else first. Gideon's jaw tightened. I ran into Boyd Caldwell in town. He asked what I was doing out by the swamp. I might have mentioned you found something valuable. You might have mentioned. Sterling felt his hands form into fists. You told the Caldwell brothers about the gold, knowing exactly what they'd do. I didn't think they'd come right away. I just thought, you didn't think at all. Harlan's voice was sharp with anger. You put everyone here in danger because you couldn't keep your mouth shut. A heavy fist pounded against the cabin door. The sound echoed through the small space like a gunshot. A voice called out, deep and rough. Sterling Wade, we know you're in there. We know you found something valuable on your land. We're here to discuss a business opportunity. Deputy Rawlins straightened his shoulders and called back. This is Deputy Rawlins. Whatever business you think you have, it can wait until proper legal proceedings. We're not interested in legal proceedings, Deputy. We're interested in coming to a friendly agreement with Mr. Wade. Now open this door, or we'll open it ourselves. Sterling looked around the cabin. 6 men trapped inside a small wooden structure. 3 armed men outside who had no interest in following rules or waiting for judges. The strongbox sat in the middle of the floor, containing enough gold to make desperate men do terrible things. Copper growled low in his throat, the sound continuous and warning. The dog's hackles were raised, his body tense and ready. Sterling had never seen the animal react to humans this way before. Even with Marcus Gentry and Deputy Rawlins, Copper had remained calm. But something about the men outside triggered a primal response in the dog. Marcus Gentry moved toward the back of the cabin, where a small window faced the marshland. There's another man out back. They've surrounded the place. Of course they have. Harlan's voice was bitter. They've done this before. Corner someone, make threats, take what they want. Everyone knows it, but nobody can prove it because the people they rob are too afraid to testify. Sterling made a decision. He picked up the strongbox, the weight of it straining his arms, and shoved it into Harlan's hands. His brother nearly dropped it, surprised by the sudden transfer. Take it out the back. Get it away from here. Sterling, what are you? I'm going to talk to them. Keep them focused on me while you get the gold somewhere safe. Go to your house. Hide it in your barn, your cellar, anywhere they won't think to look. But do it now, before they realize what's happening. Harlan stared at his younger brother, and Sterling saw something shift in his expression. Recognition, maybe, or respect. The look of a man realizing he had underestimated someone for far too long. If I take this, they'll come after me too. My family will be in danger. I know, but you've got resources I don't have. Protection. Friends who'll stand with you. And maybe, Sterling paused, choosing his words carefully. Maybe it's time you remembered that family means more than just protecting your own reputation. The pounding on the door came again, harder this time. Harlan hesitated only a moment longer, then moved toward the back window. Marcus Gentry stepped forward as if to follow, but Deputy Rawlins blocked his path with a deliberate movement. You stay here, Marcus. If there's going to be trouble with the Caldwell brothers, I want everyone where I can see them. Gentry's face flushed with anger, but he stayed put. Rawlins helped ease the heavy strongbox through the window to Harlan, then watched as Sterling's brother disappeared into the marsh grass. The deputy turned back to the room, his hand resting on his sidearm, and Sterling saw something in the man's expression he hadn't noticed before. Determination mixed with disgust. Rawlins had seen too many good men destroyed by men like the Caldwell brothers. Too many families threatened. Too many times when the law couldn't protect the innocent because influence and money twisted justice into something unrecognizable. Sterling pulled the door open before anyone could argue. 3 men stood outside, spread across the clearing in a formation that suggested military training. Boyd Caldwell stood in the center, the oldest and largest of the brothers. He wore a long coat despite the heat, the kind that concealed weapons easily. His brothers flanked him on either side, younger but no less dangerous looking. Boyd's eyes moved past Sterling, scanning the interior of the cabin. "Mr. Wade, we heard you came into some good fortune today. Found something valuable buried in your swamp." "You heard wrong. Found nothing but some old paper money. Confederate currency that's not worth the cost of burning it for warmth." "That's so." Boyd's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Then you won't mind if we come in and take a look for ourselves?" "I mind plenty. This is my property, and you're not welcome on it." Boyd's expression hardened. "We can do this easy, or we can do it hard. Mr. Wade, your choice." Copper moved to stand beside Sterling, the dog's body rigid and alert. The growl coming from the animal's throat was continuous now, a low warning that made Boyd's youngest brother take a step backward. Deputy Rollins appeared in the doorway behind Sterling. "Boyd, you're making a mistake here. There's a lawman present. Whatever you're planning stops now." Boyd laughed without humor. "Deputy, with all respect, we both know how this works. You're one man with a badge. We're three men with a legitimate interest in making sure the law's being followed." Sterling stepped aside, gesturing toward the open door. "You want to search the cabin? Then search it. You'll find exactly what I told you." The three men entered, their boots heavy on the wooden floor. They moved through the small space efficiently, checking everywhere. They found the bundles of Confederate currency scattered where Sterling had left them. Boyd picked up one bundle, examined it, then threw it down in disgust. "This is all that was in the box?" "That's all." Sterling kept his voice tired. Defeated, Boyd turned to Deputy Rollins with narrowed eyes. "You saw what was in that strong box when it was opened?" Rollins met his gaze without flinching. "I saw Confederate currency, worthless paper that wouldn't buy a meal anywhere in the territory. Now if you're done here, I suggest you leave Mr. Wade's property before I decide you're trespassing with intent to intimidate." The challenge hung in the air. Boyd studied the deputy's face, looking for weakness or deception, then slowly nodded. "We'll leave, but we'll be watching, Deputy. Watching to see if any gold suddenly appears in Sterling Wade's possession, or in his brother's, or anywhere within 50 miles of here. And if it does, we'll remember this conversation." He looked directly at Sterling. "You might have moved it, might have gotten it somewhere safe, but gold has a way of surfacing eventually. When it does, we'll find it, and when we do, we'll remember who tried to cheat us out of our rightful share." The three men left, mounting their horses but not riding away immediately. They positioned themselves at the edge of Sterling's property, making it clear they intended to watch and wait. Marcus Gentry pushed past Sterling and headed for his own horse without a word, his face dark with frustration at being outmaneuvered. The man had lost his chance at the gold, and everyone knew it. Sterling waited until dark before leaving his cabin. The Caldwell brothers had maintained their watch for 3 hours before finally riding off, but Sterling knew they would have someone checking the roads and watching Harlan's property. Moving the gold to a bank would have to wait until they could arrange protection. For now, keeping it hidden was the safest option. He found Harlan in the barn behind his house, the strongbox sitting on a workbench. His brother looked exhausted, older somehow than he had that morning. Gideon sat on a hay bale in the corner, his face pale and drawn. When Sterling entered, the young man couldn't meet his eyes. Harlan spoke first. "Gideon has something he needs to say to you." The young man stood slowly. "I'm sorry, Uncle Sterling. I didn't think about what would happen when I told Boyd Caldwell about the gold. I just wanted to seem important, like I knew something valuable. I didn't mean for it to turn into this." Sterling looked at his nephew and saw genuine remorse mixed with shame. "You nearly got everyone killed. Your father, me, Deputy Rollins. All because you wanted to impress someone." He paused, letting the weight of those words settle. "From now on, you work to earn back the trust you threw away. You help me work that marshland. Learn what real effort looks like instead of just talking about other people's business." Gideon nodded, unable to speak. Harlan placed a hand on his son's shoulder, the gesture both supportive and firm. "He'll work. I'll make sure of that. And he'll learn that family loyalty means more than reputation or looking impressive to dangerous men." Sterling turned his attention to the strongbox. "What about Marcus Gentry? He's not going to just accept losing out on this." "Gentry left town this afternoon," Harlan said. "Deputy Rollins made it clear that his verbal contract claim wouldn't hold up in any court. Without the gold in hand to prove it existed, he has no case. He's gone back to his ranch to lick his wounds." Harlan opened the strongbox, revealing the coins gleaming in the lantern light. Close to $20,000. More money than most men see in a lifetime. Sterling felt the weight of that number. But as he looked at his brother's face, he realized the money mattered less than he had expected. "This morning you laughed at me. Made me feel like I was the biggest fool in the territory." "I know." Harlan's voice was rough with shame. "I was wrong to do that. Wrong to assume I knew better than you about what choices were worth making. You showed more courage accepting that swampland than I've shown in 10 years of playing it safe and protecting my reputation." "Why did Deputy Rollins help me?" Sterling asked. He was ready to side with Gentry at first. "I talked to him while we were moving the strongbox," Harlan said. "Rollins has watched the Caldwell brothers intimidate and rob people for years. He's seen families destroyed, men beaten, property stolen. All of it just barely inside the law or too hard to prove in court. When he saw them coming for you, he decided that for once he was going to stand on the right side." "Badge or no badge?" Harlan paused. He also said that watching you refuse to back down reminded him why he became a lawman in the first place. Copper pushed through the barn door and moved directly to Sterling's side. The dog looked tired but content. Sterling reached down and scratched behind the animal's ears. None of this would have happened without him. He found it when I would have given up. He knew there was more when everyone else saw only worthless paper. "Then he deserves a share," Harlan said with a slight smile. "Use some of that gold to buy the best cuts of meat the butcher has. Feed that dog like royalty for the rest of his life." Sterling felt something tight in his chest begin to loosen. The gold would change his life, buy him real land and respect. But standing in his brother's barn with Copper pressed against his leg, and Harlan looking at him like an equal for the first time in years, Sterling understood that the real fortune had never been just about the coins. It had been about refusing to accept what everyone said was worthless, and discovering that sometimes the things others dismiss hold the greatest value of all. If you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen now to watch another unforgettable tale where courage and loyalty collide in ways you never expected. Don't forget to subscribe and consider a super chat to help us keep bringing you more stories like these. Your support means everything to us.